Hey guys, it's Danny. Alrighty, today it's Friday, I know, but we're gonna have a sort of a discussion that will have some practical applications as well. It's not gonna be pure theoretical. And we're gonna talk about context in solving orchid problems. In my opinion, knowing the context pretty much solves 80% of the problem, simply because it gives you all of the details you need to make a correct assessment. Without the whole picture and the context, you will most likely, in my opinion, have a wrong deduction or, in happy cases, incomplete deductions. So before we start, let me paint you a picture. A little funny idea to start with. You might have known that I consider myself a very cringy person in the sense that I am, let's say, socially awkward. I don't like to say stupid stuff in public because I feel like I want to bury myself in the ground and never resurface. And well, I feel the same way about stating stuff in public without having at least the context. That is the reason why I paint such a vivid picture, or at least I try to in my videos, and I blab a lot just to give you all of the details, all of the story, so you don't say silly stuff in public like I do sometimes. And let me just give you an example. Let's say Anna has 100 apples. And one person says, Anna's a hoarder, and then everybody stares back at the person because everybody knows Anna is in a competition to gather apples for the poor. You know, you don't want to be that person. But it's most important when it comes to growing orchids. It's actually crucial. So at some point or another, we will have some questions, some concerns about our orchids. And what do? We ask other people or we Google it. And sometimes we will find some potential answers. Now, we kind of need to adapt those answers to our situation and see if they fit. If they don't fit, then obviously it's not the case with our situation. We shouldn't just get an idea that we read on the internet and put it as an answer to our situation, because most of the times it is kind of wrong. So what helps us in determining if a certain answer is the correct answer for our situation? The context. Let me give you an example that was pretty popular, I think last year, in 2016. So the most popular idea in 2016 was that the red pigmentation that sometimes we can see on our orchids is a lack of magnesium. In my videos, I always told you that the red pigmentation is a natural pigmentation that orchids and other plants have that usually is more vivid in bright light. Not only in bright light, in cold temperatures as well. But some orchids do display this pigment, particularly Phalaenopsis, as natural, even without stress factors, as just natural pigmentation. And I was also saying that generally the Phalaenopsis that are purple will have some purple pigmentation on the leaves as well. And well, I'm guessing that an article appeared around that time, or somebody mentioned it, that the lack of magnesium actually causes the red pigmentation. And many comments on my videos and responses to my viewers said, no, it's magnesium deficiency. Which was totally incorrect, simply because context was not taken into account. Don't worry, I'll get into the magnesium problem because I've solved it. Let's talk about the context. So let me find a very red orchid for you. Aha, I have one. Alrighty, so the two orchids in front of us are very different. One belongs to the Cattleya family. This is the Cattleya renemarques, pretty orchid, and one is a complex hybrid Phalaenopsis. And although they're not the most purple things you've ever seen, you can see there is quite a lot of purpleness shown on the leaves and on the stems on both of these orchids. On the Phalaenopsis, mostly on the underside of the leaf. Now, one of these orchids receives very bright light. This is the Cattleya, and the other one receives pretty low light or intermediate light, never receives direct sunshine, not even filtered, and this is the Phalaenopsis. Yet both of them are pretty purple. Well, both of these orchids have the purple or red pigment. Sometimes it appears as red. And this pigment is called anthocyanin. Now, anthocyanin or cyanin is a red pigment that many plants have. It can be displayed on the stems, on the roots, on foliage, and on flowers. So pretty much the pigment can be found in all of the structures of the orchid. And not only, plants in general as well. But this pigment is not only responsible with the creation of the beautiful pigmentation of flowers. And we just find it in all of the structures just because, you know, it's produced by the orchid, it's a little bit excessive and so on. Actually, this pigment has a much more important role, as recent research shows. I will link you down below to an article talking about this red pigmentation and what it has been discovered about it. One of the most common, let's say, idea about the red or purple pigmentation is that it actually helps with photosynthesis in high light. So I will give you a small resume of the article I linked to down below. I'm not going to go into everything, but you should read it because there are many interesting things there. So it would appear that the anthocyanin acts as protection of photosynthetic apparatus. What does this mean? Well, it means that when this purple pigmentation is present on the leaf, the plant can photosynthesize better in very high light. It doesn't mean that the plant photosynthesizes better in general, because orchids which have this purple pigmentation in low light do not photosynthesize as better, but in high light, it would appear that the anthocyanin reduces both the frequency and severity of photoinhibition, as well as to expedite photosynthetic recovery. And that was a quote from the article. So bottom line, in bright light, it makes photosynthesis more efficient. Reason why maybe some of our orchids go this really nice purple color when exposed to very bright light. And the most common orchids which do this are the Cattleya family, because most of them are very highlight plants. And not only them, Vandas as well, and some Vandas do get this pigmentation as well. Now, in the case of the Phalaenopsis, we cannot really talk about highlight, can we? So what can we talk about? Lack of magnesium? Well, not really, because we need to think about the context. It is an isolated case that received the same care and the same treatment as the other Phalaenopsis, yet she has this, let's say, redder pigmentation in comparison to, let's say, this Phalaenopsis orchid. The difference between them is that this redder Phalaenopsis is purple, has purple colors, while this doesn't. It has, let's say, brownish type of flowers. So how can we explain the different pigmentations? Well, one explanation would be the presence of this pigment in the orchid simply because it needs to allocate it to the flowers, or more interestingly, it might have to do with temperature. Now, before we get into the temperature, I think I found the source of the trouble, let's say, of last year's hypotheses with the magnesium. There is an article issued by an Orchid Society which correlates the lack of magnesium to the red pigmentation in cold temperatures. And while you read that article, you get the impression that if you have low temperatures and you have an orchid which displays this purple pigmentation, it is a magnesium deficiency, and they even tell you to add magnesium to the orchid, to feed it magnesium, and all of your troubles will go away. From personal experience, I can tell you that will not happen. You can try it, it will not happen. You will not solve your issue. Why? Because the issue is not magnesium. The issue is the temperature. Once you pull that orchid from low temperatures to adequate temperatures, you will notice the pigmentation pretty much going away. That's why I was telling you that the red pigmentation is a sign of low temperatures. As I was saying, if you will try to maintain the orchid in low temperatures and feed it magnesium, you will not solve anything. Now, why is that? Because the article says it's magnesium deficiency. Something doesn't really add up. Why would my orchid turn green if I remove it from the cold temperature? Will it not suffer from magnesium deficiency anymore? Well, their explanation is something like the orchid is not prepared to handle the cold because of the magnesium deficiency. So let's return to the article I was telling you about and read a bit more about anthocyanin. If you scroll down the article, you will find a section called Amelioration of Stress Responses. For those of you who don't necessarily know what amelioration means, it's a Latin word, I think we have it in our language. It means easing, let's say, making things a little better, a little copable, let's say. Now, the very first paragraph, what does it say? I'm just going to read it to you. The induction of foliar anthocyanins has been implicated in the acquisition of tolerance to many different kinds of environmental stressors. Anthocyanins, for example, are associated with enhanced resistance to the effects of chilling and freezing. And then it goes on to saying heavy metal contamination, desiccation, and wounding, and so on and so forth. So the very first stressor is cold temperatures and freezing. Now, I did have an orchid which I sadly purchased in a very cold month, and it did arrive to me with some cold damage. As you can see, the pigmentation is not necessarily purple, it's a little bit more red, and this is because many orchids don't have the very same hue. It is the same pigment, but it kind of looks a little bit different. Sometimes it can look a little bit more dark purple, sometimes even pink, sometimes even red. There is a Cattleya, I think King of Taiwan, if I'm not mistaken, goes completely red. A very dark cherry red, that is. And as you can see, my orchids are very dark purple here. So the color itself, as you see it, can vary. And I can tell you, like I've told you in my previous videos, yes, The red pigmentation can be a sign of cold, but it doesn't mean it is associated with magnesium. It would appear that the pigment helps the orchid cope with the cold better. And indeed, the orchid that you just saw on the screen with the cold damage, she lost that pigmentation. Sadly, I lost it due to fusarium. That's a whole different story. But the pigmentation disappeared within about 2 weeks. The orchid was completely green again, and there was no dead tissue that I had to discard. Practically, I consider it to be the practical application of what I just read you in the article. Absolutely makes sense. Therefore, the article that suggests that redness is associated with magnesium deficiency, in my opinion, it is wrong, and sadly it has been issued by an Orchid Society. Now, of course, there might be cases which link the magnesium deficiency with the red pigmentation. I'm not gonna say it's not true, but I believe the article is not complete. And it's not about comparing two articles and not knowing what to believe. It's about my experience, and my experience tell me that magnesium is not linked to redness in cold weather. There we go. So that was the whole picture, because the orchids which I just showed you, they're not kept in low temperatures. And yes, it is winter, but I did not expose my orchids to very, very low temperatures. I'm also using the AC. Also, the Cattleya type orchid that I just showed you is exposed to very bright light. The Phalaenopsis, no, but it is a purple Phalaenopsis. This is not a purple Phalaenopsis. Am I fertilizing my orchids? Yes, I am, with a complete, let's say, meal. I'm using the MSU. And since I don't have a constant streak of issues, I cannot say, oh yes, it is a magnesium deficiency. But there we go. If we don't have the whole picture, if we just read an article and implant that idea into our mind without taking into account the whole picture and the whole context, we are very, very extremely prone to guessing wrong and having a wrong deduction. And to finish up the red pigmentation and magnesium deficiency idea, it has been actually shown that magnesium is correlated with the purple pigmentation and anthocyanin, but in the opposite way, meaning that addition of magnesium tends to intensify the purple coloration. And if you want more details on that, of course, you'll have the link down below. But there we go. If you want something to be purple, apparently you have to give it magnesium. That's a joke. I'm sure there are conditions for that to happen. In yesterday's video, in which we worked with a Vanda orchid, I was talking about the yellowing of roots. Yet again, it is really important here to think about context. In most cases, they appear due to lack of light. You might know that orchid roots are capable of photosynthesizing, therefore they have the green pigment called chlorophyll present in their roots. If the roots do not have access to light, there is no use for the chlorophyll, therefore the orchid doesn't produce it. Why waste energy, right? So in most cases, you will have that Phalaenopsis in the bark medium, which will have yellow roots right in the center. Now, there is the place where light cannot go through. Being that orchid roots do not have as a primary objective to photosynthesize, they will not die off or get very sick if they don't receive light. And P.S. I talk about the functions of the roots a little bit more in a different video. Check it down below if you would like to see it and are interested in learning more about the root system. Therefore, when you have yellow Phalaenopsis roots or other orchid roots, Cattleya roots, they can go white, the white that doesn't green up when you water them, there's no need to cut them because they're not sick roots. They just don't have the chlorophyll pigment. However, though, in yesterday's video, I showed you a yellow Vanda root. And as you might know, I keep my Vandas bare rooted in my transparent pots that I use as baskets. That root was exposed to light. It should have been green. It wasn't green, it was yellow. Therefore, chances are the root was about to die off. So what makes the difference between the yellow Vanda root and the yellow, let's say, Phalaenopsis root? Context. One of them received light, the other one didn't receive light. However, though, if I don't know the context, I might end up cutting yellow Phalaenopsis roots that are perfectly fine and viable, right? So yet again, context saves the day. Context is also responsible for answering the question, why doesn't my orchid bloom? Well, sometimes it might be because it is off-season, but that's a lighter case. There are infinite amounts of cases in which not knowing the actual context leads you to make a wrong decision perhaps, or think wrong things, or just say silly stuff in public, which I am guilty of saying so many times. Therefore, context for me is really important socially and orchid growing. And by knowing all the information and painting the most complete picture you can, you are able to give, let's say, the closest to the truth answer possible. We are not always perfect. We sometimes do mistakes, absolutely yes. But the more you know about the picture, the less prone you are to saying silly stuff. So that's the topic for today. Wanted to address it. It's a little detail that sometimes doesn't cross our minds. When we read, let's say, an explanation about why something is like this, we tend to choose the easiest explanation, right, and call it a day. But when we put it in practice, we see it doesn't work. Well, that's because it's not the correct explanation. It doesn't really take into account all of the factors. And I know many of us are prone to go for the easiest way out, but it's not always the correct way out. And to answer a question that I got recently, why I don't make 3-minute videos, because I cannot paint a picture in 3 minutes. And I just explained that context is really important for me. If I would make very, very, very short videos in which I wouldn't explain as much as I possibly could, let's say in that video, I would not sleep well at night because I would always wonder, did I say something extremely, extremely stupid in that video and everybody sees it? Oh my goodness. You know, I cannot live with myself if I do that. So I prefer just to talk more about it and give the most accurate answer or explanation or, I don't know, example that I can. And that's the discussion for today. It should have been posted on Sunday, but I think Sunday we're gonna answer some questions. So that said, thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you've enjoyed it. If you did, you know the drill. Give it a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. Subscribe to my channel for regular orchid videos, and don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss a video. And with that said, I'll see you all next time. Bye!